On today's show, the Capitals signed Martin Fehérváry to a 7-year extension, and the Nikolaj Ehlers rumors intensify.
You're Locked On Capitals, your daily podcast on the Washington Capitals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Well, hello and welcome into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Dan Holme. I've covered the Capitals for the past 3 seasons for Locked On and various other outlets before that. I'm also the host of the weekly show called The Capitals Minutecast, available wherever you find your podcasts. And as always, I want to thank you for making this your first listen of the day. So in this edition of Locked On Capitals, free agency started today, and the Capitals bid farewell to 2 players, Lars Eller and Ethan Bear. I'll talk about that a bit later. We'll talk about the Ehlers watch. Can the Capitals pull it off? I think there is the distinct possibility, at least when I record this at 6 p.m. Eastern, that the Capitals can pull it off. Do they have what it takes? But just to get it going here, the Capitals took care of some business before this whole thing kicked off by signing a Martin Fehérváry to a 7-year extension. And if you're a Capitals fan, I think that got kind of lost today in the fact that the Capitals didn't make any big acquisitions, but a big move for the Capitals. And if you know anything about Martin Fehérváry, if you know anything about the Capitals, he is a huge piece on this team. And if you don't believe it, see how the Capitals struggled when he got injured, and how the Capitals kind of flailed in the playoffs in his absence. A big piece, and will be here for a long time. So let's dive into that in segment number 1 here, talking about the Marty party continues to keep rolling. And for me, for one, like I said, I love it. I think the Capitals blue line is in a pretty good position going into next season. And the party will keep going in DC. The Caps re-signed Martin Fehérváry, like I said, to a 7-year, $42 million contract extension. And to be clear here, that is a big number, $6 million AAV. And the thing of it is that this whole deal doesn't even kick in until the 2026-2027 season. So he will be on the Caps blue line for many years to come. And I'm feeling pretty good about it because, there's some change coming that we know that John Carlson is entering into a contract year. The TVR is entering into a contract year that if they can have some stability, and Martin Fehérváry definitely provides that, I think it's huge. And kind of a tougher guy on the team. And I don't think that, when you think of tough guys on the Capitals, that maybe Martin Fehérváry isn't the first name that comes to mind, but, finishes his checks, throws the body around, a big piece. There is a lot to love about this deal. And the thing I like about it, still a young guy, 25 years old, top 4, shutdown defenseman, and some of his skills and his skill set, durable, physical, skates like the wind, and he kills penalties better than most anybody in the league. And a lot like other Capitals players last year that took big jumps, Fehérváry was no exception. Career high in points with 25. He led the team with 3 minutes, 20 seconds per game shorthanded in his 245 total PK minutes, ranked him 4th in the entire NHL. That is some elite company, folks. And that is why the Capitals did what they did. And, like I say, I don't want that to be lost in any, things that happened today that, some teams got better, but big picture, not a whole lot. There were some bigger moves. What we saw is some players re-up with their current teams, those kind of things that I think the big news from the Capitals was the extension for Martin Fehérváry. A big thing, to be clear here. And, the thing I like about him is he is a guy that's tough and he doesn't complain, never misses a shift off, eats pucks, hits hards, goes back out there and does it again and again. A tough guy and just durable. I know that he faced that injury, but, everyone is prone to injury, but big picture, he is durable and a perfect fit on this team. And Chris Patrick, of course, is loving it as well. He said, quote, possesses all the core qualities of the Capitals, unquote. And, you see he's rewarded with a lot of playing time. He is given a lot of responsibility, and he continues to knock it out of the park season after season after season. The thing I like about this whole deal is that it didn't go out until next summer when he could have tested the open market, because let's be clear here, there is 31 other teams out there that would have really liked to have Martin Fehérváry's services. He will be a Capital for a long time. But as far as his comments, Chris Patrick, I could not agree more. His skating, his conditioning, and that team first attitude is what I love about his game. That's what we want on the blue line moving forward. Like I said, changes, and you see Sandin, and you see some younger players, and you see Declan Chisholm, a depth piece. That the Capitals' blue line is in a pretty good position, and I don't think they want to go into next season, or more specifically into next postseason, with question marks, talking about a lack of depth that I think they're really set up. But he did have that injury, which is what derailed his great season that he had last season with a meniscus tear, I believe it was, but he had a meniscus surgery in April. But Chris Patrick said he is progressing well and should be ready for training camp, and is going to get back out on the ice there in the next few weeks. So everything is good in the world of the Capitals, and a lot of answers, not a whole lot of questions, a couple of questions on the blue line going forward. So what does that mean for this team? Well, I mean, what it is they locked in the top four core with Carlson, Chychrun, Sandin, Fehérváry, Roy, and TVR. And if you're asking me, that's 6 deep right there with 6 really great players. And, I know that TVR gets a lot of shade cast in his direction, but he also took steps forward this past year. So big picture, I like the Capitals. I like how they're set up on the blue line. But now it's just all about them staying healthy, because, health and injury, those are the things that you can't anticipate. I guess you can anticipate them. You just don't know when it's going to happen. But a solid move by Chris Patrick and the Capitals, taking care of business with a player that is definitely deserving of every penny. So that is the big news coming out of today. There wasn't any big acquisition. Again, I'm recording this at about 6:20 p.m., so it's kind of a fluid situation. If something's going on while I'm recording this or after, you'll have to forgive me. But as far as the Capitals today, did not go out and take any big swings. In the next segment, I'll talk about Ehlers, but a big piece of business was taken care of, and a sigh of relief for me to a certain extent, is I did not want this to go to the open market next summer. All right, so coming up here after the break, the Ehlers watch. Can the Capitals pull it off? I'll discuss straight ahead. Ever wish managing your money felt easier? With Monarch Money, it can. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money is more than a budgeting app. It is a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you can also concentrate on building wealth. And the thing I like about it is that you can take a look at how you're spending money. And I realized I was spending too much money on going out to eat and food delivery. Now I don't do that. And if you have a significant other in your life, you can also plan your financial future together. Saving, so you have enough money. That is what I love about Monarch Money. And I think that you will too. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your order. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNHL for half off your first year. All right, welcome back into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Dan Holme. You can find me over on Twitter. It's at DanCaps218. You can find the show on Twitter. It's at Locked On Cap. So wow. The big news out there in the Capitals world is Nikolaj Ehlers and Elliot Friedman making a connection with the Capitals, that the Capitals very well are one of the front runners or one of the finalists in the mix to land the Nikolaj Ehlers sweepstakes, if you will. Quite a thing. And if you want to take a look at it, could be a big piece for the Capitals. So why no word today? So what we heard is that he has a Swiss based agent. So we won't have any answer until tomorrow or perhaps later in the week. But the Capitals are in the mix. And I think it's one of the things that Chris Patrick wants to take care of, to put a stamp on it, say, I made a big move. Look at our team now. Let's talk about that in segment number 2, talking about the Ehlers watch. Can the Capitals pull it off? And I kind of kept refreshing Twitter X all day, trying to see, is there any Ehlers news? Is it possible, as he is one of the big pieces out there that I think could definitely be an upgrade for the Capitals? And the Capitals are in the hunt. Elliotte Friedman said the front office wants him and is planning a pitch. So that's a big thing. And I think they've made their offer to his representation, to Nikolaj Ehlers, and the ball's kind of in their court. Does he want to be a Capital? That's a big thing. Is the money enough? That kind of thing. That I think that it would be a good fit. You know, in my mind, I kind of already have him penciled in. I'll talk about that a bit later. But a big thing here, and Elliotte Friedman was kind of joking about it, saying they should set up a meeting kind of like a Don Draper in a dim lit boardroom, and talking about, hey, if they even have to throw Ovechkin in there to close the deal, I'm not against it. Of course, it's a bit of hyperbole and sarcasm there, but I think that the Capitals have made their pitch, or they will make a pitch when available to talk to his representation. But I think there's a good chance. I mean, you take a look at the Capitals historically, year after year, are a great organization, and I think he would be an absolute great fit on this team. And if you take a look at it, Ehlers, I think, is exactly what the Capitals are looking for. He is a play-driving winger who had 24 goals, 39 assists, 63 points in 69 games with the Jets. So can put up some big points. What's not to like? And I'll talk about here in a little bit here about why it could be a perfect fit for this team. But you take a look at his points. That's nothing to gloss over. That is nearly a point per game pace. And, you know, the thing of it is he does it with puck control and elite hockey sense. And it's about sustainability, and it's about consistency. And he's done it. He has 8 20-goal seasons under his belt. That, my friends, is consistency. So it's not like a flash in the pan, like a guy that was good for 1 year and then kind of dropped off the year after that. I think he could be an absolute huge piece for this team. All right, so here's where it gets fun. And in your mind, and if you're a Capitals fan, maybe you kind of have him penciled in. So if the Capitals acquire Nikolaj Ehlers, where would he fit? Oh, I've got it. Connor McMichael, left wing, fixes to be one of the front runners to play the third line center position. He's at least in the mix. So what could that mean? Nikolaj Ehlers, second line left wing. So can you see it? First line, Ovechkin, Strome and Wilson, and the second line, Ehlers, Dubois, and Wilson or Protas or Leonard, something like that. It is an exciting prospect to think about. And I know with some of these players, they can play both wings, but that's just a loose sketch in my mind. But I think Ehlers and Dubois on the second line could be lights out with Ovi and Strome and Wilson playing on that first line, that this team could be very good. And that whole thing about the third line kind of sucking last year could be suck less, if you will, if they have McMichael as that third line center, with, maybe Leonard on that right wing and I guess fill in the blank on the left wing. It's still kind of a loose sketch. I'm doing with an etch-a-sketch here. I got to make sure not move it around. But I like where the Capitals are at, and I like that they're in on the mix. And, the thing of it is that I know that Elliotte Friedman said that the Capitals are in on it. It just makes it feel like they're trying to do something. Now, I don't want to look at Sordiff and Chisholm like, woo, whoop-de-doo, but that's kind of what I'm hearing around Capitals socials, the fans that are in all caps on Twitter X saying, is that all the Capitals are doing is Sordiff and Chisholm? How are they going to be that much better? That I think the fans need a player to get excited about. And I think that Nikolaj Ehlers fits the bill. he could change a team that was good and make them great. Not even that. A team that was great and make them excellent. That the Capitals did the things. And, you saw big players take steps forward. You got to think that Nikolaj Ehlers is noticing that. And I'll talk about here in a bit the other team that's in on the mix. But I think the Capitals deserve a good opportunity to be in the mix for him. I think that as long as they offer him a fair amount, and he wants to be a Capital, right? That's the big thing, is that, some players only want to go to certain teams because, you take a look at Mitch Marner. You could give him all the money in the world. I don't think he's ever going to be a Buffalo Sabre or something like that. So, when you get to that level, I'm talking upper echelon. I'm talking like Nikolaj Ehlers, who's not, apples for apples with Marner, but still a premier talent in the NHL that you can kind of pick your own fate. If you are a good player and there's a team interested in you, you got kind of the pick of the litter. You're not someone that's settling for a job anywhere in the NHL. So again, I think the Capitals could be in the front running for it. However, it's not that easy. All things in life aren't. Carolina is still in the mix. They've tried to trade for Ehlers multiple times, but the Caps have the cap space, a strong pitch, and a wide open role to offer. So why not? I'm not afraid of dreaming here. Take a look at it. That probably means that Connor McMichael will be that third line center. And I'm loving that too. You saw Connor take steps forward on the wing, but if it doesn't work out, he can play the wing at the center. But I think to get things right, you get Connor back to the center position, Nikolaj Ehlers on the second line, left wing. There is a lot to love about even thinking about that. So, of course, I will have you guys covered the entire way on Locked On Capitals. If you don't know, subscribe on YouTube. I do shorts, those kind of things when these big things happen, a 60-second video or so breaking it down. But if in the event that the Capitals do land Nikolaj Ehlers, keep it locked to Locked On Capitals, as you will be the first to know. All right, so coming up here after the break, we'll say a bit of a goodbye to Lars Eller. Thank you for your contributions as he heads out to the Sens, and Ethan Bear heads out to the island. I'll discuss straight ahead. All right, and welcome back into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. The best way that you can help grow the show is to subscribe to Locked On Capitals on YouTube and comment anything down below. So it was July 1st. Today. It was the start of free agency, and a lot of people saying, is this all the Capitals are doing? Remember, this is free agency. This isn't the trade deadline. They can still make moves now. It was just kind of the start of everything today. And the Capitals did big things today. The biggest thing, of course, was Fehérváry, 7-year extension, a lot to like there. And being in the mix for Nikolaj Ehlers, definitely a story that I will be covering here, but a bit of a bitter farewell, or a somber farewell, I guess I shall say, is that Lars Eller and Ethan Bear will be headed on to their next team. And as far as Lars Eller is concerned, I will never forget his contributions. I'll never forget what he did for the Capitals in the 2018 Stanley Cup win. You know what I'm talking about, that he was a huge piece in that victory. Still a great player, was able to land a 1-year deal, which I'll talk about here in a second, with the Senators, that he is still a viable option. But, you take a look at it. This is the second go round with him. I think that when the Capitals acquired him during the season, that they were trying to fix the third line center position. He was just not the guy. And I don't know if there was the right guy, but they reached for some familiarity. They reached for some vintage vibes. So let's talk about the farewells here in the final segment of the show here. And we'll start off with Lars Eller. And well, the Tiger is off to Ottawa. 1 year, $1.25 million out to the Sens. This is the second time the Capitals let him walk away. And of course, the last time, of course, I don't see him making a return, but big picture, a huge piece for the Capitals. Not so much this year. I think, if we want to look at value with him this year, it was that leading voice, that veteran presence that no doubt instilled some of his knowledge with some of the younger players. But you take a look at him this past year, split between the Pens and the Caps, scored 10 goals, 22 points. But in DC had a smaller role than he's used to, averaged just 12:26 of time on ice and 10:45 per game in the playoffs. And, he noticed that, right? He talked about it. He said that this is the lowest on time on ice that he's had since his rookie year, something of that nature. Yeah, Lars, maybe if you played better, maybe if your line played better, you'd get rewarded with more time. You see Spencer Carberry do that. The players that really stand out, he rewards them with more playing time. So even if the third line sucked and you were the only redeeming quality, he would have found a way to bounce you up in the combos and get you more time on ice. Not the case, and it's got to be a bit tough for a guy with, like I said, his big contribution, in 2018. But the game moves on. The roster is getting younger. It's the next wave. It's Leonard, Miro, McMichael, all needing time on ice. And you know what? It made sense. If the Capitals would have signed him to a new deal, I would have been very surprised. Very, very surprised, as a matter of fact. So he's not done here. He's got hockey left to play with Ottawa and is still going to suit up for Denmark at the 2026 Olympics. And he's the all-time leader among Danish players in NHL games played, 1,100, and ranks third in points. So, the guy in his heyday was one hell of a hockey player, and nobody is going to take that away from him. It's just not his time, not anymore with the Capitals. The final farewell was Ethan Bear. And the thing of it is there was such high hopes for Ethan Bear. I remember there was a frenzy at the time when, the rumors, is he going to get traded to the Capitals, or what team is he going to go to? And the Capitals landed Ethan Bear. And I wanted to believe, he was going to be the future face of the Capitals blue line with Rasmus Sandin and Fizzle. Didn't happen. Went to the players' assistance program, all of that. Had a bounce back season in Hershey. Let's talk about him to close out the show, as he signed a 1-year, 2-way deal with the Islanders after putting up 46 points in 62 games in Hershey. And he was an AHL All-Star. He had a great bounce back season, but between the depth on the D and his own NHL struggles, the Caps just didn't have room for him. He's a bit different than Eller. I could have seen them signing him to a deal as just like a depth piece, like a guy to put in the cupboard. But I think that ultimately the Capitals don't want to do that. They want a change. That is why you saw the addition of Declan Chisholm, not to mention Vinny Iorio and the different players that are in the pipeline down in Hershey, that I think the Capitals have depth. They have stability. They have solidified the deep pairings there as well. I think the Capitals are in a good position. And at the end of the day, I'm happy for him and his opportunity out on the island. But you take a look at it, dealt with injuries in his career, bounced from Edmonton to Carolina to Vancouver, then landed with the Caps before entering the NHL's player assistance program. Tip of the hat to him goes out to him because he got right what was wrong in his life, dealing with some personal issues. And a bounce back season. I think he was probably hoping for a bounce back season with the Capitals, but found a way to get it done with the Hershey Bears and played good enough that a team, i.e. the Islanders, that wanted to take a flyer on him. And I have no doubt that he will be a big contributor on an Islanders team that I think is going to be next level. Maybe this year, but if not this year, in years to come, with the draft picks and the trades and the acquisitions, that the Islanders had a bit of a bump in the road this last year, but I think will be a team to be reckoned with. If I was Ethan Bear, I would hold my head up high that I still have an opportunity in the NHL or the AHL on a team that is truly going to be good for years to come. So, a farewell, but, like I say, I wish Lars and I wish Ethan nothing but the best in their future endeavors in the NHL or AHL. Great players, and I hope that a change of zip code and scenery will help them in their pursuits. But, again, to wrap up day one here of free agency that, and again, I'm recording this, it's a fluid situation that the Capitals, as a matter of fact, did not make any big acquisitions so far, but it's still early, and they are still in the hunt with Nikolaj Ehlers. Can it happen? Of course, I will have you guys covered on Locked On Capitals the entire way. All right, once again, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals, your only daily year-round podcast covering the Capitals. And I want to thank all of you that listen on the audio side and watch this on YouTube. You are what makes this show successful. When you're done here, head on over to Locked On NHL, as they have you covered 5 days a week, available wherever you find your podcasts and on YouTube. All right, once again, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It is your team every day. My name is Dan Holme, and I'll talk to you again next time.